So have you ever really stopped to wonder what exactly happens when we cross the threshold between life and death? I mean, it's a profound question, right? One that has completely captivated humanity for literally millennia. Well, today, we are going on a really fascinating journey right to the very edge of human existence. We're going to explore the biological reality, the deep cultural meanings, and the cutting-edge medical science that exists at the ultimate threshold of death.
Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here with us today to unpack this incredible topic. Okay, let's dive into this.
Here's a quick roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll medically define this final stage. Then, we'll look at culture, mind, and mortality to see how different societies process it all. After that, we're exploring consciousness on the brink, followed by the real-world science of resuscitation, and finally, the actionable steps communities can actually take to save lives.
Section 1. Defining the final stage, biology versus the clinic. Okay, so medically speaking, dying isn't just a simple flip of a switch. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a complex two-stage process. First up, we have clinical death. This is that precise moment a person's heart stops beating and blood stops flowing. But here's the thing, that is not the absolute end. The second stage is biological death, and that happens when brain cells actually start to die off because they're starved of oxygen. The gap between clinical and biological death creates a literal ticking clock, and that brief, critical window, that is exactly where the ultimate medical stakes lie.
Section 2. Culture, mind, and mortality. Processing the inevitable.
Long before we had the high-tech medical tools to intervene in that ticking clock, human societies had to find ways to mentally and spiritually process this final stage. And honestly, the responses vary wildly across the globe. On one hand, many Western cultures have built what sociologists call a death-defying culture. It's heavily medicalized, it's viewed almost like an enemy to be fought against, and it typically happens isolated away in hospitals. But contrast that with the Islamic perspective, where the time of death is viewed as predetermined. It's the will of Allah, something to be naturally accepted. You see a similar acceptance among the Asante people of Ghana, where death is just a preordained destiny and a really communal transition to an ancestral realm. In those contexts, aggressive medical intervention to prolong life can actually seem inappropriate. It's just a fascinating contrast in how we face our own mortality.
Now, moving from broad cultures to individual minds, we have to talk about psychological adjustment. You've probably heard of psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's famous 5 stages of grief for terminally ill patients, right? Denial and isolation, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally, consent or acceptance. For decades, this was the go-to framework helping doctors understand the profound emotional roller coaster people go through when facing the end.
However, modern science has a slightly different take today. The current consensus is that these 5 stages are not strictly linear at all. Patients might completely skip phases or bounce around them totally out of order. We now understand that grief and the psychological processing of death are just deeply individual. It's influenced by a person's age, their environment, their relationships, the whole shebang.
Section 3. Consciousness on the brink, the AWARE 2 study.
Now, what's really interesting about this concept is what happens in the brain during that crucial ticking clock window after the heart stops. The statistics here are just staggering, 1 in 5. That means 20% of people who survive CPR after cardiac arrest recall having completely lucid experiences of death. To put that into perspective, if 5 people go through this, 1 of them comes back remembering something profound, like separating from their body or deeply evaluating their life, all while they were clinically dead and entirely without a heartbeat. No way, right?
Dr. Sam Parnia, the lead investigator of the study, explains it brilliantly. He says, as the brain is shutting down, many of its natural braking systems are released, providing access to the depths of a person's consciousness. This process is known as disinhibition. It's like the brain's filters just drop. Researchers remarkably detected spikes of brain activity, specifically gamma and alpha waves associated with high-level thought, up to an hour into CPR. This strongly suggests our sense of self does not just instantly vanish the second clinical death begins.
Section 4. The science of resuscitation. Pulling us back.
So, if the brain is still active during that ticking clock, how do we save it? Let's walk through an incredible real-world case. This is the harrowing story of a man named Peter. One day, out of nowhere, Peter collapsed at home from sudden cardiac arrest. He was completely unresponsive, not breathing normally. His wife, Joanna, immediately knew something was terribly wrong and called 911. This right here is the exact high-stakes scenario EMTs train relentlessly for. In Peter's situation, every single second counted. Over the phone, the 911 dispatcher confidently guided Joanna through telephone CPR, literally counting out loud with her as she pressed firmly on Peter's chest. Within just 4 minutes, EMTs rushed onto the scene and seamlessly took over. They immediately initiated intense, high-performance chest compressions and ventilations. They were working together like a highly tuned machine to manually keep blood flowing to Peter's brain. And while those intense compressions continued, the EMTs swiftly attached an AED, an automated external defibrillator, to Peter's chest. The machine analyzed his rhythm and delivered a life-saving shock that effectively reset his heart. Amazingly, within weeks, Peter literally walked out of the hospital with a full neurological recovery. His life was saved because of a seamlessly optimized EMS system, much like the world-renowned King County Medic One.
Section 5. Steps to Save Lives. The Global Resuscitation Alliance. Let's move forward and see how this all builds together.
You see, Peter's story isn't just some random miracle. It's the direct result of highly structured protocols that literally any community can replicate. The Global Resuscitation Alliance provides this incredible 10-step menu for communities to follow. Now, sadly, right now, most places have sudden cardiac arrest survival rates sitting in the single digits. But by implementing these steps, starting with the basics, like setting up a cardiac arrest registry, getting telephone CPR right, and doing high-performance CPR training, communities can dramatically shift those odds. From there, they can tackle the big stuff, like deploying smart tech to alert nearby volunteers and building a true system-wide culture of excellence.
So the crucial point is this core mantra: measure, improve. If you aren't measuring your performance, you simply cannot improve it. Think about it. If you don't know the exact time it takes for a dispatcher to recognize a cardiac arrest or exactly how deep an EMT's chest compressions are, how can you get better? You've got to measure, improve, measure again, and improve again.
Another really essential thing to keep in mind is that this kind of change happens step by step. Transforming a massive emergency medical system doesn't just happen overnight. It takes strong leadership, real local accountability, and the patience to take it one step at a time. You have to celebrate those small wins until the system is finally robust enough to reliably pull people back from the brink.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. We've journeyed from the biological ticking clock of clinical death through deeply ingrained cultural beliefs, peered into the highly active minds of those on the brink, and finally looked at the incredible medical systems built to save them. So I ask you, how does our evolving understanding of the threshold of death change how we choose to live today? Thank you so much for exploring this with me. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next explainer.